My question is, do you plan to apply your way of architecture to perhaps higher density, high-rise commercial and residential buildings? Now, I know you said that you are not as interested in these dense modern cities in China, that perhaps they have lost hope. But the reason I still ask this is because these dense cities and their downtowns are still the symbols of a civilization's pride and power. So, and I understand that you are trying to perhaps change China's image and invent an original aesthetic and ideological way of architecture for China. So, but until you tackle these core cities, how will that be done? Because no matter what you do in the countryside, there will always be these tall towers standing in Beijing and Tianjin and Shanghai, and they will inevitably have to resort to the Western system, if only for practical reasons, for structural reasons. So, do you plan to move in this direction, and if so, how?
In fact, in China, it's not easy to talk about these topics. For example, it's not just about architecture design, in fact. I do one high-rise apartment building 10 years before. It's a very crazy approach. I used the 200 courtyards put together, built 6 towers, everyone is more than 100 meters. And I think the idea is that every family, they can keep small courtyards. It's also can plant some trees, vegetable, and flowers, something like this. Every 6 family can share some public space, public courtyards like this. But the family, in fact, is very successful. But family and farm, it still means not good because it's just to some approach about architecture, but what mainly about the city structures. Another idea, finally, be cut by the trend. I built 2 or 3 floors, very high density building on the foot of the high-rise building. They have a straightforward walking system, and finally, the trend say this means no safety, so cut. And so that's the why I don't like design some projects like this, because very difficult to change urban planning in China. This means every high-rise building, they directly destroy the city structures. In fact, in New York, you find it's good, because the high-rise building, they have a very close relation to city's life, to the street's life. But in China, you're going to see, you'll find it's the Capsias ways. Actually, high-rise building that keep the distance to the very wide street, many cars, high-speed traveling. It means huge circle. I think maybe it's the most bad way in all the world about the city development like this.
Your work is so rooted in China and Chinese tradition. Are you interested in working in other countries? And if so, how would you translate your approach to New York City or London?
Yeah, of course, I also have an interest to exchange. This means you can exchange thinking with other people in a different country, and especially focus on the difference. What's really meaning of the difference? For example, the Chinese now, they're thinking, we are so similar to United States. It almost become American, but they still have the difference. This means it's different, right? So I'm very interested about this. What means in a very normal life, you can find this difference. So if I have a chance, I like to do it.
Have you been approached by any foreign clients?
No, usually I like to do something by chance.
Thank you.
First, I would really appreciate you introduce our hometown. I'm from Hangzhou. Yeah, I really show off things, great things in Hangzhou. And I have a question about I saw the criticism about saying you kind of adopted the kind of cubic form
I don't know. It's in fact, I'm more interested about how can share some same feeling as between the traditional things and modern things. In fact, if you really happen to see the Chinese architecture, traditional architecture, apart from roof, everything is a cube. But this cube is not a closed cube, it's the open cube, right? So cube is not just belong to the Western world, it's a cube. So, but on another side, really we have a real problem, it's a real question is as the majority modern architects, they don't know how to design roof. The roof is very difficult. If they use it to design cube, it's very difficult to think about how to design roof.
I think so. These be the last questions, otherwise we keep you all night. Sorry, and then who hasn't approached the mic?
I have an extra question. Like, do you have any advice?
Yeah, 2 questions. No, I'm just kidding.
Like, do you have any like advice for younger Chinese architects? Or we are like studying?
Yeah, in fact, of course, I have my reason why I keep my studio scale so small. But on the other side, I really think I should keep this scale small and give some example to young architects. Yeah, you know, my studio usually just 6 to 7 people they working together. But we can do so many new approach. We still can do so large scale project. So we really want to gradually have the rich experience about this, how like the young people's different small groups, sometimes they can come together, sometimes they can do the independent works. We have these links in our systems. So some of my friends, for example, some is engineer, some is artist, usually they have independent jobs, they do their works. But when they are in the phone call, I want to do interesting things. This time, everybody should come to here, working together. Everybody, it means promote. It's everybody have to promote. They will do some interesting things, we will work together. So this means very elastic system, especially for young architects, it's really work. It means you can keep your independent state. It's very important. If you, for example, you graduate from the art school and go in a big business office, it's very easy to jump in. So usually I give advice is, maybe you consider 2 or 3 years, please come out. You should keep your independent state, thinking and feeling gradually you can go up, I think.
I'm really glad you showed the Portuguese painting from Song Dynasty, where landscape is really the dominant feature of the narrative. And if you have to look really, really closely to find these poets in exile or painters on vacation trying to escape from the reality, I'm glad because in 2008 I received this very challenging task to edit and translate your cover feature article for A+U in Shanghai. Actually, I had to take many, many long walks and see to it to actually translate some of the deep wisdom and the philosophy of the literary tradition in your embedded grammar, in a way. In the end, I think I understood most of the tradition, most of the questions about materiality and time, but there's one sentence I still think I have a question about. You said your full-time job or profession is to live alive, and architecture design and building is just something you do on the side. And that, I think in the end, is the attitude that I still don't, can't fully translate to the audience. And I think that's really the spirit of amateur studio. Do you find that is still the case after you win the prize, and has anything changed?
No, I don't want change.
I'll be quick.
Three questions that are they're very quick. One I think you might have already answered, which was the staff. One of the things that's really striking about your work is the scale. And so the first question is, how many staff in your office? You said they're kind of pretty devoted to more or less one project. You're very selective in your work. Two, on some of the larger scale projects, how many contractors are actually there, and builders are there? And then three, you mentioned your concern regarding traditional craftsmanship and traditional skill and the age of the worker that knows some of these skills as they're getting older. What, if anything, can you do about that other than design buildings that require that skill?
In fact, my studio is very small. It's very small. I don't want it to become too big because now we keep the feeling of family. We can work together. Everybody really know each other. It's very big. On the other side, for the press managership, we have a different team in the press in our area. They work. They keep the long relation to our studio, long time, around 10 years. Because this means we show really understand each other. It's every time when we talk about tradition. In fact, now today this means new approach. Because we don't really know tradition. How you can use the tradition in a modern way. Everything means new approach. So we keep the long relation to the pressman. We do many experiments with them.
And in terms of keeping them around or keeping that knowledge around, just continuing to design buildings that require that skill, is that necessary? In terms of making sure that skill set remains, that skill set exists, I guess the answer is just continuing to design buildings that require that skill. So even if the existing generation of contractors, pass away or stop building, it's passed on to somebody else.
It's very difficult to say about this. Usually, we call it an uninterrupted studio because we are more near the schooler. Usually, we have some interesting to this point, to that point, and we accept a project just to follow our interest about research. This is our way about work. I don't understand.
Thank you.
Hi, my question is, how is to work in collaboration with your wife? How is to work in collaboration with your wife?
That's a good one to end.
Yes. So in fact, I'm more crazy in my studio and many crazy ideas about new approach. But my wife is from the starting point to the final point.